Hey, what's up everybody? Welcome back to News Dose, and it is finally happening. The Gamers Holiday will be complete tomorrow morning because Nintendo just announced their June Nintendo Direct, which will take place at 10 a.m. Eastern Time on June 18th. So there you go. This will be a 40-minute long showcase, and by all means do expect a lot of announcements to be here, and hopefully it'll be a fun time. I will say this right away. I think we do need to go in with the understanding that Nintendo is in a transitional period. So basically what that means is that most of their huge megaton games by this point are probably being developed with the Switch successor in mind, which they've already confirmed the Switch successor will not make an appearance at this Direct. Instead, their main focus is for games releasing in 2024. So I do think that we need to set realistic expectations given the circumstances. But even still, I do think that there's potential that we could still get some really cool announcements, and I'll float some of my predictions your way. I mean, we'll see how this video holds up tomorrow and see if I got anything right, but we will talk about that here in just a moment. Before we do, though, we do need to talk about something else that involves Nintendo, and this is actually a really big development that changes things. I've said this so many times this past year, and I'll go and say it again today. The game industry is changing before our very eyes. There are things that are currently happening right now that if you told most of us just 10 years ago, we probably wouldn't have believed you. Xbox is putting some of their games on rival consoles, all while trying to support their own ecosystem at the same time. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going completely third party. That's not what that means. They still have future consoles planned, and they still have future exclusives planned as well. I think they did a pretty good job at showcasing a lot of that at their showcase just earlier this month. We'll see if all of this pays off for them or not. Only time will tell. But the thing that we've really seen throughout 2024 is that most people thought that this was just Xbox's strategy. That, though, is where things start to get really interesting, because one of the most shocking announcements at the Summer Game Fest this year was Horizon Adventures. PlayStation's Guerrilla Games teamed up with the LEGO Company to work on their own first-party IP, Horizon. Now, I actually really like this combination on paper. I think it's a good fit because Horizon is an IP that I think kids will really enjoy. Horizon has a creative world with really cool dinosaur-like enemies, and I think kids are going to love that. So I think that this is a great partnership on paper. But it's also a partnership that's caused a lot of heated discussion online. Obviously, the big surprise to its announcements was that it's not just a PlayStation game. To some shock, it also is coming over to PC and the Nintendo Switch day one. Now, at the time of its announcement, most people seem to have believed that that was a decision made by the LEGO Company and not Sony. You know, the LEGO Company wants to make the most money that they can, so in order for them to agree to this partnership, the belief was that they more or less forced Sony's hands to include the Nintendo Switch as well. Now, to be completely fair here, I think that's a logical conclusion to come to, similar to what happened with MLB The Show as one such example. You know, that's a partnership that includes a third-party company, and now it's multi-platform, but apparently some new information has come out regarding Horizon Adventure that suggests otherwise. Yeah, apparently this wasn't just the LEGO Company forcing their hands after all. Check this out. This statement comes from Guerrilla Games, and when asked about the Switch version, this is what they said. It was just a really unique opportunity for us. It was a natural fit for the ambitions that we had. I keep mentioning it, but we want this to be for everyone, and the Switch is really a platform that allows us to broaden the audience. Now, the way this statement was worded, again, it makes it sound like this is something that Guerrilla Games and Sony wanted to do, which honestly, I think makes sense. I want to go ahead and flip this entire story for a moment because everybody keeps focusing on what the LEGO Company wants from this partnership. But let's look at it from Sony's perspective for a moment. If they would have made it exclusive to PlayStation only, and if it were to fail, who does that really hurt? Well, Sony is the publisher. It's Sony's IP being Horizon, and it's their studio Guerrilla Games, who's working on it in partnership with Gobo. So who's really risking more here? Is it the LEGO company or is it Sony? I'd have to say Sony based on the information that we currently have. So then how does Sony lower the risk of making a game that they're typically not known for? Well, I think we kind of have our answer for that. Put it on a device that has a huge family-friendly audience, being Nintendo. Now, I'm not saying the Legos didn't have any hands in this decision, but it does take two to tango, and it's clear that Sony was very much on board for a Nintendo release. They had to agree to this, and even more so, Guerrilla Games said that they wanted to make a whimsical adventure, and this was an opportunity for them. Now, at the end of the day, though, I think this is a smart business decision for them to make, and it actually, brings more awareness to the other Horizon games that are exclusive to PlayStation. But it's really just more evidence in how the game industry is currently changing. This is something that is completely unexpected from what we would have gotten 10 years ago. Even Sony now is looking at opportunities to expand beyond just their console when it makes sense. Now, that doesn't mean that they're going to do this with every single game. I wouldn't expect it for any of their big single-player AAA games. But they are being more open about this more multi-platform idea than we've ever seen before. And I think it's going to be very interesting to see how Horizon Adventures sells this holiday. That's another question that's really not being asked enough. This is a very similar situation as Xbox on PlayStation. Sea of Thieves is selling incredibly well on PlayStation, and that speaks volumes to Microsoft's upper management. So much so that despite their original statement that it was only going to be these 4 games, it convinced them to put more games on PlayStation going forward. And if Horizon Adventures sells well enough on Nintendo, who's to say that Sony's management won't look at that data the same way and say, well, we have other family-friendly games as well. Maybe something like Sackboy Big Adventure would make sense on Nintendo. In fact, and I know this is almost unbelievable for me to say, but suddenly games like Sly Cooper 5 would make more sense because now this opens the door to sell their games to this massive family-friendly audience that Nintendo has. Now, I'm making some pretty far-out leaps here. I understand that. And I'm not saying any of this is going to happen, but I think it will be very interesting to see how Horizon Adventure sells this holiday, especially on the Switch. At the end of the day, it's money that speaks to these companies, and if it does well on Nintendo, again, who's to say that Sony won't look into that a little bit further? Let me know what you all think about all of this, though. What's your opinion on what Guerrilla Games said and Horizon Adventures being a Nintendo Switch game? Okay, so let's go back to that Nintendo Direct, though, and go over some possible announcements that they could make. Like I said in the opening part of the video, I don't think that we should expect a bunch of massive announcements, just considering this is really a time where they're just trying to tide us over until the eventual Switch successor. But if there's one major game that could make an appearance, I would think that that would be Metroid Prime 4. Now, at the same time, though, I wouldn't necessarily be shocked if it doesn't show up again, just because I think this would make for a great cross-generation game, kind of similar to what they did with Zelda Breath of the Wild for the Wii U and the Nintendo Switch. They could do something similar with Metroid Prime 4, and if they do, they could hold this game back a little bit more. And, if they do that, what I think they could do here instead is they could release Metroid Prime 2 and Metroid Prime 3 for the Switch over the next 6 months. That would get a lot of people caught up on this franchise because, you have to kind of remember here that these games are nearly 2 decades old now. For me, that's kind of hard to believe. I'm getting old, but, a lot of the younger audience haven't played these games, and these remasters would probably do the 4th entry a lot of good before it eventually releases, whenever that will be. For that matter, there's been various GameCube remasters that's been speculated and rumored these past few years. F-Zero GX is one that we've heard a lot about. Maybe a potential remaster with online multiplayer. I think that alone would be really big for this game and its fans. Now, maybe they could give it the Metroid Prime remaster treatment. I think that would be huge. But even if not, it's a game that holds up very well with its current visuals. We've also heard a lot about the Zelda Wind Waker and Twilight Princess HD ports. It's honestly kind of crazy that these are 2 of the only Wii U games that's yet to be ported over to the Switch, where they have a better opportunity. And honestly, these would be really great holiday releases. I think they would drive a lot of excitement to the Nintendo Switch for its last holiday all to itself. So in a way, with just these remasters alone, Nintendo would be primed for a decent holiday lineup already. But I think there's one other first-party announcement that they could potentially make that we've already heard a lot about, and that's Fire Emblem Genealogy of the Holy War. Technically, this would be another remake, but similar to Live Alive HD, it would more or less be a brand new game for most people because the original never released outside of Japan. Really, I mean, just kind of looking at this series, I'd say that it's been mostly a good generation for you Fire Emblem fans. Now, as for third-party games, though, Final Fantasy Tactics has been making the rounds lately, not just with leaks either, but Square Enix themselves have kind of hinted at it as well. And with Nintendo being such a powerhouse for JRPGs and just tactics-based games, this would be the perfect place to officially unveil it. For that matter, I do expect Dragon Quest HD 2D to get its official release date here. It's been like 3 years since its original announcement or something like that. So it's far along in development by this point, and there's a good chance that it will release later in 2024. Now, there has been some rumors that it's expanded to the entire original trilogy, Dragon Quest 1 through 3, but with the entire Midori situation and all that drama, there's more skepticism of how legit those leaks actually are. And, if anything, we'll soon find out just how much Midori actually knew. In fact, Midori also claimed that Fantasian will be at the Nintendo Direct. I personally hope that's true, but again, we'll see if that rumor actually holds up. Speaking of Square Enix, though, one developer that's worked a lot with Nintendo this generation has been the Bravely Default and Live Alive studio, Team Asano. Earlier this year, they did hint at a 2024 announcement, so maybe they have something at this showcase. As a fan of theirs, I'd personally be thrilled if that were the case. Now, one last game that I'm going to mention, though, is Beyond Good and Evil, the 20th Anniversary Edition. Its trophies were just spotted on the PSN backend last week, and that more or less means that an announcement could happen at really any moment by this point. So the fact that it wasn't at the Ubisoft Forward showcase leads me to believe that they have a surprise reveal planned for the Nintendo Direct with a potential shadow release. For that matter, an Among Us update seemingly leaked out as well. So there you go. Those are my predictions. We'll see if I get anything right. But let me hear your guesses in the comments below. Anyways, though, that's going to be it for this episode, and I'll be back tomorrow after that Direct. So until then, peace out.